What do you make then of the World Club Championship that's been proposed? Interesting, isn't it? And we're finally going to get an answer to the question, it seems, that we would ask in rugby club bars and discuss amongst groups of mates and in pubs and on WhatsApp groups. Who is the best club team? Are Toulouse better than the Crusaders? How would the Blues stack up against the Bulls or against Bath or Bordeaux? We're going to get an answer to that question as of 2028. And I didn't want to talk about it at the back end of last week when this burst on the scene, this story, because I thought that would dilute the build-up to the Champions Cup final. But now the dust has settled, there's a bit more detail, and I've had a chance to have a think. And I have thoughts, some very, very positive, some less so. I've got some issues, I've got some questions. One thing I don't have all of, or many of even, is answers. But that's maybe where you can come in the comments. Please get stuck in. I'm Tim, this is Egg Chasers. And before I get into that, actually, before I get into this story, which, as it turns out, was an accidental scoop from Alex Lowe of The Times, the communications team were not meant to announce the World Club Championship, but they kind of did accidentally. I mean, are you surprised the administrators of rugby make a communications cock-up? No, I'm not either. But it was a great story. Well done, Alex Lowe, for that. And now it's been confirmed and we're getting some more details. But before I get to that, can I just say thank you for your support on the channel? Because let me just say, when I was 10 years of age, long time ago, I told my mum I wanted to be the rugby correspondent for The Telegraph. That's what I wanted to do. I mean, I haven't ended up doing that. I'm very happy with how things have panned out. It's been great. But you can imagine, with that being what I thought when I was 10 years of age, how excited I was when this happened yesterday, as I record this, when the chief, the senior rugby writer for The Telegraph, the man who had the job I wanted when I was 10, and he's amazing at it, by the way. Charlie Morgan is about the best in the business, in my humble opinion, and he wrote a story about me. And yeah, the acquisition of the broadcasting rights for Pro de Deux, which I'm putting out on my other channel, FR UK Rugby, live rugby, tomorrow night, Thursday night and Friday night, the semi-finals of French Pro de Deux. So make sure you check them out. I'll be with Joe Worsley tomorrow night for that game. Friday night's game, Dan Bigger is joining me on commentary because Joe Worsley's team Breathe are playing. So Dan Bigger, I'm going to be doing commentary with Dan Bigger, which is amazing. So again, thank you for your support, helping make all that possible. Back to this story then. And yeah, if you haven't already, hit subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. And as I say, get stuck in the comments down below. Let's talk about this World Club Championship. What is it, firstly? Let's ask the what question. Well, a 16-club knockout competition played over 4 back-to-back weekends in 2028 and confirmed also for 2032. I am all in on that. Like I say, a question we ask many, many times: who's the best club team? How would this team get on against that team? We don't have to imagine it now. We don't have to fantasize about what the result might be. We can actually see it on the field happening for real in what will be a big occasion. And when I think back to the great Super Rugby sides, those matches in the late 2000s between the Crusaders and the Bulls, I used to watch that and just think, oh wow, how are Toulouse or the great Leicester Tigers team of that era, Wasps, how do they stack up? How would they stack up? Well, we don't have to ask anymore. I mean, Rugby League have had a World Club Challenge for decades. Rugby Union's finally catching up, and not before time. We're only going to get an answer once every 4 years. The thing I love most, and I want to put the positives up front and out there, the thing I love most about this is the fact that these 4 weekends are going to be at the end of the club season. Before the July test window, this will be the very last club rugby that we watch. The pinnacle. That is awesome. And the thing that's amazing about that is that this has managed to inspire the French top 14 to compromise. And that is what is so needed in rugby, is some people to not just look after their own self-interest, but to look after the bigger picture for everybody. Now, I'm sure the top 14 are probably thinking that some of their clubs are going to be very well represented in this competition. Toulouse, Bordeaux, La Rochelle, maybe Toulon and others will all be vying for it. But for the top 14 not to be the final club game of the season is a big step for the people in the top 14. And I think that's awesome. And it could lead the way to an alignment of rugby moving forward. The global calendar never been able to be sorted out. We've got the situation this summer where New Zealand may not face a full-strength French team because the top 14 goes on until the end of June and the players have played Six Nations and the whole top 14 season and Champions Cup, and they might be too tired. Now, that may still be the case after a World Club Championship, but it's a step in the right direction, and that could be the biggest impact of this tournament, is the alignment of the domestic leagues, maybe compressing the season so there's more space for these big showpiece events, which is awesome. I've always thought that the Champions Cup final that we saw at the weekend should be the last game of the season after all the leagues are done, but that's not the way it works out. So that's great. What else do we know about this? Destination cities is what they're going for. There's been talk about Barcelona being a host for these, and I like that as well. Now, a lot of fans will immediately kind of complain and say, well, that's a bit of an issue because if you're a fan of the Bulls, it's really hard to get from Pretoria to Barcelona, and it's a lot easier if you're from London or you have the means, or so maybe it's not putting fans first. I get that, I do, but there's no silver bullet on this one because by the very nature of it, you've got fans of clubs from all over the world. So why not take and leverage all of those big names, all of those great history, storied clubs, and take them to what I love about Barcelona as a suggestion is Spain is a country that needs help to grow rugby. They've got so much promise there, and it's one of the emerging countries. Why not use this competition to, yes, go to a great location for fans, but also try and help the local native Spanish population get a bit of top-class rugby that might just inspire their success there. So that's brilliant. One question, why has this happened? Why do you think this has happened? I've asked the how, I've asked the what. Why? Cash money. Simple as that, isn't it? It's money. It's cash. Now, let me bring your attention to this. Do you remember all this talk? This was back in November of last year. But to be honest, it's talk that's gone on for years. There's always been these rumblings of a potential breakaway league. We've had billionaires before trying to sign up players on contracts if they manage to get a kind of franchise Formula One style competition, which would mean less games for players, more money for players, moving the game around the world. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? But that's a massive threat to the clubs themselves. So I think that may be what has inspired all of these club bosses to sit around a table and go, do you know what, I'm going to compromise a little bit. What can we do? And that's what's going on here. This is all about cash to put as much cash in the pockets of players, the top players as possible, and the clubs as possible to try and stem the possibility of a breakaway league. And, you know, I'm all for players getting whatever they can. It's a career that can be ended with one tackle, and it's a short career, and they deserve to make as much as they can. So I think that I take that as a big positive as well, that this could be very lucrative. Maybe some of that private equity cash that everyone's talking about. Now, that's all the positive stuff, okay? And there's plenty there that's really, really exciting. What about the issues? What negatives do you see? Firstly, the Champions Cup. That's one of the fundamental potential drawbacks here. The standing of the Champions Cup has never been lower. It's never been lower. The numbers of viewers that I've seen from the weekend just gone, brilliant game as it was, it's not what it was. The competition is not what it was. Part of that is down to the broadcaster situation. That's a particular issue in England, where it's on a different broadcaster from the Premiership, and therefore there hasn't been the uptake. I know it's different in other countries, but it's never been worse. But I think it's not just about the broadcasting deals. It's about the format of the competition, and I'm not going to go over all ground. You know, I've been over this loads and loads of times. There's too many teams. There's too many people get through to the knockouts, which means that the pool stage lacks jeopardy because teams can send second teams to away matches, win one home game, and get through to the knockouts. 16 teams getting through is too many. Then you have seed 1 against seed 16. It's too mismatched, and you get blowout victories, dead rubber matches. It's frankly, Northampton Saints saved the competition with their win in Leinster in the semi-final, and it was a really, really entertaining final. But this is the worst Champions Cup that there's been. And this is a competition that's been running for 30 years. And as I've said many, many times, my favourite memories watching club rugby are watching this competition. The Heineken Cup, as it was, and still the Champions Cup, is as close as you get to Test rugby in club jerseys. And it is the pinnacle and it is the ultimate. But that reputation has taken a hammering. And this could just take it down another step. Because once every 4 years, you're going to stop the competition at the quarterfinal stage and not find a winner of that competition and move the teams on to a different competition. Right. What's that going to do for the standing of the Champions Cup? Would the Champions League in football do something like that? Not in a million years. Can something be the pinnacle of club rugby if once every 4 years you don't have a winner of it? I don't know how that works. Feels like a little bit of a Frankenstein's monster or a square peg being put into a round hole, whatever analogy you want to use. So I'm really not sure about that, whilst I like the general concept. Secondly, 16 teams. It's too many. 16 teams in the World Club Championship is too many. It's the same as the Champions Cup. Not elite enough. I don't know when rugby's going to finally twig what I think to be the case. Let me know if you disagree. Scarcity has a value. The NFL, teams play, if they win, they play 18 games in a season, maybe 8 or 9 home games at most. And that's it. That's the whole season. And they're sold out and they make billions. And the story wraps around the year because of college football and the interest in the draft, because the fact that the NFL have total access to all of the teams and players, so they're constantly churning out stories. So the content is going around 24/7, 365. They uplift people like me that follow NFL. They say, yes, have the content, have the access, tell the stories. And they're just forward thinking like that. But the one thing they don't do with a dangerous physical sport is overplay their players. We're always told welfare is the most important thing. Is it heck? You keep making more and more and more games. And that's rugby's approach, it seems, to making more money, is to have more games. No, scarcity has a value. And the Champions Cup is exactly an example of that. 16 teams qualifying for the knockouts is too many. 8 English teams out of 10 qualifying for the competition in the first place is way too many. And I mean, the Rugby World Cup's 20 teams, or it will be 24 at the next one. 16 teams for a World Club Championship is too many. So, and how does that break down? This is another negative. How does that break down? 8 teams from the Champions Cup, so the teams that make it through the round of 16 get to the World Club Championship. 7 teams from Super Rugby, and 1 invitational team, thought to be Japan. So there are 14 teams in the French top 14. There are 16 teams in the URC. There's 10 teams in the Premiership. I make that 40 clubs. 40 clubs, 8 teams qualify. That is 20%. Super Rugby, there's 11 teams. 7 teams qualify. I make that, and yes, I had to use a calculator, 64%. Nearly 2/3 of the teams in Super Rugby qualify for this competition. World Club Championship. Come on. It's got to feel elite. If Auckland Blues, I think they finished 7th, so they would be the lowest ranked Super Rugby team that get into the competition. Apologies, Blues, if I've got that wrong. But let's say, I think it's Blues in 7th in Super Rugby. Let's say the Blues suddenly hit some form and win the World Club Championship. I mean, fair play to them. But do you think that's going to... Hold on, they finished 7th in their competition and then they won 3 matches and they're the best club team in the world. Huh? It has to feel more elite than this. Also, when you look at how it breaks down, that's 40 clubs in the URC, French top 14 and Premiership, and only 8 qualifying, 20%. That means there's a very real possibility there'll be some countries not represented. And I'm not sure that's the best thing either. For example, this year it would have been no South African teams. Another year it might be no English teams. Or you could end up with a situation with 5 French teams in it. And then, you know, if you had no South African team, Bulls would be a great example. The Bulls wouldn't have been in a World Club Championship if it happened this year, but they were in the URC final last year, and they've just finished 2nd in the regular season of the URC. And you're putting 7th place in Super Rugby into a competition that they're not represented in. That doesn't make sense, does it? So again, to go back to that point I said at the start, a great idea, badly executed, is a bad idea. And I'm not saying that is what's going to happen, but for several reasons, I fear that that might be what happens. And we've seen it with the changes they made to the Champions Cup. Great idea, they wanted to tweak the Champions Cup. Badly executed has made it a bad idea. We're all excited about the thought of seeing the Crusaders against Toulouse. But we're not going to be as excited about it. The private equity partners aren't going to be as happy with their investment if they pile in all this cash. We all sit down on the telly and watch it, and it just feels a bit meh. Which, in the current format that's being proposed, being suggested, I think there's a danger of that happening. That and the another knock it will have to the reputation of the Champions Cup. Yeah, I mean, there's almost an argument that you just have to ditch the Champions Cup and just pick your horse. If you want to do it like this, top 16 teams from around the world, just pick that and scrap the other one. But stop trying to do this Frankenstein's monster of an approach. So love the idea. And again, to finish on the positive, getting the top 14 to say, yes, we will finish our league earlier could be one of the biggest things to happen for rugby and an aligned season, and getting the best players playing in the biggest matches with the biggest audiences and generating the most money. That could be the biggest legacy of this competition. So for that, I'm really grateful. But I'd love to know what you think. Let me know.